I've seen all of you around, but I don't know all of you guys. Okay, what year are all of you composers in? I'm curious.
Big old.
Okay, yeah. Cool. So how many of you guys have written a piece in either entirely for strings or with a lot of heavy use of them?
The Lord.
What? Sorry, I'm not reading like a crazy text.
Oh, that's fair. Have you, Omar, written a piece with strings heavily included or purely for strings?
Yes.
Raise your hand.
Oh.
There you go.
Nice. How many of you guys knew exactly what you were doing when writing for those string instruments?
No.
Thanks, Oscar. Oscar, I've played your pieces. I know you didn't. So we're gonna go over a bunch of things by string musicians that have played y'all's pieces before. These are some things to make writing for strings easier, both for you guys and also the people playing your pieces. So we got a bunch of stuff to go through. It's all good. So as we're going through this, if anyone has questions, just like give a hand and I'll do the teacher thing. Oh, you answer. If the string people in the room have anything to add, same thing. At the end, a bit of a Q&A if you guys have other questions then. We're going to go through a bunch of these. We have all four of the string instruments here to demonstrate on anything. If you guys want any demonstrations more than what we give initially, that's also a thing. Just be like, hey, can you do this? This is you guys' chance to ask as many questions as possible. So, I can't think of anything funny to say. Okay. All right. So the first thing, doubles, triple stops, and chords. This is what happens when you play multiple notes at the same time. So you can, like, because a string instrument has 4 strings, right? You can play 2, 3, or all 4 of them. For double stops, when you're playing 2, you want to make sure that the range of the double stop is not too big. You want to keep it below an octave, otherwise string instrument hands will not be able to reach it. And on bass, if you want a bass player to not kill you, don't go above a fifth. And with other string instruments, a lot of times you're not going to want to go over a sixth, just because they'll either sound weird with the way the instrument resonates, or it's just not going to be easy to play at all. When you're also writing double stops, a lot of times you're not going to want to have a bunch of double stops next to each other. And if you do, you want to make sure that one or both of the notes is repeating throughout the double stops. And if the notes are changing, you want to keep it in the same hand position. Do all of you know about different positions on string instruments and shifting?
Mm-hmm. Demonstrate.
Okay.
Demonstrate. Okay. So.
No, we're still on double stops.
Okay. So, this is a G on the D string in first position. This is also a G on the D string in third position, with worse intonation. But that, you get the idea. You can play the same note in different positions. Also, basses have way more of that.
Yeah. But when you're doing double stops, a lot of the time you want to know what position a string player might be in there. And if you were going from, say, higher on the D string with a G, you're not going to want to go from,
all the way to 6th first.
Like a minor third or something like that, all the way to the note switch, and now you're doing, whatever the interval is. Keeping the same top note, but way different for the lower note. Because look at how much my hand has to move for that. It's going to make it a lot harder for the part to sound all together. And even though you're following that thing of keeping one of the notes together, the other one is just as tricky. So a lot of the times what we'll do as string players is if it's not in a small chamber context, we'll put it as divisi, which will be top player plays the top note, bottom player plays the bottom note. 90% of the time, that's what, like, in orchestra music, like when we're playing in a symphony. I don't know that I've ever played a piece that has had only double stops, because divisi just sounds cleaner no matter what you do, even if you have just notes the entire time. So, the big idea with double stops, be careful with how you use them. They can be good, but use them sparingly. Andrew?
How do using double and triple stops in an orchestra context vary from those in like soloistic or chamber context?
That's a good point. The big thing in orchestra context versus soloist is it's going to sound muddy. Because a big thing with string instruments is it's so easy because there's so many of them in an orchestra context. They start like blending together a ton. So by changing it from double stops to divisi, or even just getting rid of one of the lines entirely, you can clean up the sound of it and make everything sound so much more clear. Does that make sense? But then in a soloist context, you have a lot more freedom to do a lot more double stops because you're trying to put in multiple moving lines in one instrument.
Yeah. Do you still like want to try and apply the same rules though, like with like frequency of stops or how you're changing them, or would you approach that differently? Depending on the context, like virtuosic solo.
In a virtuosic solo, like a lot, you learn the rules to break the rules kind of thing. Like if you're writing really high level string parts, you can do whatever you want with double stops.
I hate you, but
Yeah, the string players will hate you, but it's okay.
we're trained.
But like in orchestra context especially, stay away from some of that kind of stuff. In chamber music, like if you're writing for string quartet, you kind of want to have a middle ground where you use a little bit more double stops than you would in symphony, but you still don't want to go super over the top. Okay. I think that's good for double stops. Oscar.
I think it might be, because I don't know if people know this or not, maybe it's obvious, but while you can do triple stops and quadruple stops, really you can only play 2 strings
Yes.
at once.
So that's the next thing. Like triple stops and chords are not actually 3 or 4 notes at a time. It's 2 notes at a time, but then you just do different bits. So I'm just going to demonstrate myself because it's easy. If I'm doing 3 notes at a time, I'm not going to just, it just sounds like a block. What we're going to do is we're going to play the bottom 2 and then the top 2. Same thing with 4 notes. You guys hear how, like it's, that there is almost no context unless you write it out as like a run of 16th notes where string players will play as just a blah. It'll always be da 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 when you play triple stops or chords. So,
We currently have something like that in,
what?
we have like something like that in Vorschlag right now.
Yes.
Andrew.
So like based on the performance practice, right? Like if I were to write a triple stop or a quadruple stop, how would I know? Like would it always be to a certain rhythm? Would it be like with an eighth note, like kind of like a grace note type deal? Or?
Yeah.
It
I would say so.
It depends on the context a lot. One thing with triple stops and chords is unless you specifically write out the grace note or the bottom note, a lot of times the performer is just gonna like just decide what they want to do based on the context unless you specifically tell them something.
Yeah. Like Ian said, the habit we have for triple stops and quadruple stops is that we'll play the bottom 2 and the top 2. Like, so if that makes any sense. So unless you want us to specifically just have it sound like a chord and play the top note by itself, I think you would have to do like an instance where you drop the top note as like a half note, and then the rest of them as whatever shorter interval you want that to be.
I have a piece that I'm playing right now that has a grace note triple stop, and then the top note is a whole note.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I play the first notes as just like, as a triple stop, just really quick, and then land on the top note.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the easiest way that I've seen something like that notated, because it's like you only sustain the top note, but all the rest of them are just really quick. But like I mixing it a bunch of different ways, so you guys have a lot of freedom to do a lot of that kind of stuff instead of just stacking a bunch of quarter notes. But if you do stack a bunch of quarter notes, just know that your performer will probably take some liberties with it. Then it's another thing, triple stops and chords, because they ring so much on strings, it's only going to be used as forte. Like, we will not be able to do piano unless it's pizzicato instead of arco. Which you guys all know pizzicato, right? Plugging the string. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for the demonstration.
But then, I guess like one last thing that kind of goes into the next slide here is because of how because of how the sound projection and everything works on string instruments. Whereas double stops, you can occasionally have a bunch of them back to back. With chords and triple stops, you're never going to want to put a bunch of them back to back. So this is an excerpt from Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, and you can see there's a bunch of chords here with the 3 and 4 notes in it. But there's the rest afterwards, because when we play a chord, we're always going to start not if it was all back to back, it gets really out of hand really quickly. So what we do in string playing is we want to set the bow on the string and then play it. So if we don't have time to do that, it's not going to work. Yeah. Even if we have something like something like that, I can play it, but it's not going to be the same as you guys can hear how big of a difference that makes. And all it takes is just a teeny tiny little break. So, this is perfect because it gives us time to set the bow after every single chord, which means every single one can ring a bunch. Any questions about that?
No, but I have a comment. Just really quick. Another common thing that string players do, especially if we have rests before big chords like this, or really rests before any note, is that we like to tap the string beforehand so we can hear our intonation. Because it's if you go to any solo performance, you kind of see that they pluck it a little bit with their fingers or they can tap it.
Yeah.
But in an orchestral setting, it's way easier to do that because there's so many more of us, and it's the sound of everyone else is going to muffle what we sound like to everyone else, so we can just kind of hear it better. So
a big basic idea is giving your player time to set these and find their notes. It's such a silly thing, and I know a lot of other instruments will have similar things, but especially on string instruments, because intonation, especially and tone, is so finicky on these things. You want to make it as easy for your performer as possible.
I will say this is never mind that.
There's no bass part.
There's no bass part on here.
That's my fault.
Fun thing about basses though, a lot of times you're not going to want to put chords on a bass part. It is a lot harder to do. Can you demonstrate a chord on a bass? So he's having to move his entire hand just for a simple chord like that. Whereas on the other instruments, we can kind of have our hands in the same hand position and everything. So basses, you're just going to want to give them one note, maybe two if you're feeling funky. But a lot of the time, it will just be Debussy.
Yeah.
Over the strings.
Yeah, or with
that kind of thing.
But general rule of thumb, give chords to everybody else except for basses.
Bass will be the nice bass.
You're talking about giving some time to check intonation. What is an ample amount of time to do that?
A note.
We don't need too much, but even you'd be surprised by how much a quarter rest will save our lives.
Yeah, it does.
And it's you might think, oh, I have a bunch of quarter notes here. At the end of this phrase, they can just take a little bit of a breath. But actually notating it will especially take away a huge level of stress on a string player. Yeah. Any questions about that?
Well, also with this one, if you look in the violin, the first violin line, it's the same two chords over and over. So your fingers are already going to be in place because those will be played in the same position. So you still have your roadmap of where your fingers are going to be.
Yeah. Okay.
This is kind of completely unrelated, but again, it's passage are the tremolos, which would just mean play eighth notes. I'm just curious, do string players generally reading that type of short notation? Because I feel like it's not really a thing anymore.
Yeah, this is really nice. This is a lot nicer than seeing a bunch of eighth notes, especially if you have it like this. We do have more on some of that later, but yeah, the shorthand is very nice, I will say. If you find a string player that disagrees with me, they're wrong. So, okay. Any more questions on chords, double stops, anything like that? Cool. All right. So, when we're playing a bunch of notes together, you can either play with the bow coming off the string, or you can play everything on the string. So, when you're on the string, that's going to be like a lot more structured and march-like. Usually needs to be written in. String players love just letting the bow bounce. It is a fault of ours. It's not necessarily a good thing. But it's a lot more controlled. Whereas off the string is, instead of like just more on the string, off the string, they both have their place. But that spiccato is going to be a lot lighter of a feel. It's going to be more dancey. And then there's also ricochet bowing, which is if you just do the same bounce over and over again in the same way. Yeah. That's a cool thing. However, I will say about ricochet bowing, that's especially going to need space before going back to regular bowing because we're going to have to reset our bow. The other thing is, for the most part, it's going to be really hard for string players to control the rhythm of the ricochet. So I would say ricochet is something to use sparingly, and like don't do like a bunch in a row, just like a little spurt of it. But it is a really cool thing if you can pull it off. But yeah, like string players a lot of the time are going to default to spiccato. So even if it's not something you write in, if you're in a rehearsal and you think that your ensemble is like not falling together perfectly or everything seems sporadic, just be like, hey, can you guys try this on the string? Because that'll give a lot more focused like structure and everything like it says on here. Because there's a few of you in here that have your pieces for convo tomorrow, right? How many of you guys have had something like that in a rehearsal before, where your string players just aren't fully coming together? Have you guys had that?
Not for that reason.
What?
Not for that reason.
Not for that reason. Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of depends on the style, I guess, but this is always something to keep in mind, I guess. Like, especially if you have a bunch of moving notes in a bunch of different parts. But I guess, like, kind of going off of that, what are some reasons that people fall apart in rehearsals?
I'm trying to think, this was like a year ago.
Yeah.
You were in that, right? Yeah. Because I remember you guys were like having, like, what were like struggles you guys were having with that? Recalling. So I think it was like, there were like some rhythms that I wrote in there that was kind of just like, without like having like a conductor like trying to like match that, it was kind of like hard for me to like lock in for like the first couple rehearsals. That was like the main thing. Like I think was the main thing. Yeah. I feel like you did it in a way that made sense though. No, like it's like your first time writing history.
Yeah.
I obviously made mistakes in that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Rhythms on string, I think there's more on it later, but like a first thing with rhythms is making sure that your string players are playing on the string, because that'll make the rhythms a lot clearer. I think another thing with rhythm is, this is a bit of a stereotype that Ooch likes talking about in rehearsals, but string players don't count usually while playing. And not only do we have to think about the rhythms, but we also have to think about bow distribution and like how much bow we're using, where we're ending up in the bow. Things like bow speed. I think there's more on it later, but like if you don't have a conductor, a lot of times string players are going to have a really hard time reading complex rhythms. But yeah,
that's kind of what I figured what was like going on, but like.
Yeah, and it's like, was like the kind of part where different people, like the rhythms were hard to line up between parts?
It was at like 9/8 sections, like there was players playing in 9/8 and there was like a moving line down between people. So
Yeah.
there's like competing against each other.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, string players are notorious to not count very well. So, yeah, that's kind of on the players a little bit because that is cool. But yeah, I love strings. I feel like I had something else to say, but I just completely blanked. If it comes to me in a vision, I will say something. Okay. Anyways, trills versus tremolo. So, basically, the big thing is trills are in the left hand, tremolo is in the right hand. Trill is when you have a note as bottom note, and then you just go back and forth between that note and yeah. Jen, can you demonstrate a
I would
trill?
love to demonstrate for you.
Yeah. Trill is what string. Here's an interesting thing. Trills is what composers used before vibrato was invented. So think of a trill as like in the same realm as vibrato. So the bottom note is like the main thing, but you're going to use that to like emphasize something. So like at the end of a cadence or something. But a lot of times, trills aren't going to be used as much in more modern settings, at least as far as I've seen. So
We love a trill.
we love trills, but it's the kind of thing that can be, because it's non-measured. Both of these techniques are things that you're not going to write in specific rhythms for. So if you have a bunch of players doing it at the same time, it'll get really muddy and the pitches will kind of like go together a little bit. If that's what you want, that's awesome. Love trills. But if you want more controlled things, writing out the rhythms is going to be the way to go. The other thing is with trills, you're going to default to, or string players, if it's in D major and we have a trill on a B, because the key signature has C sharp in it, we're going to trill up to a C sharp. If you want to do a different accidental or a different note, you either have to notate the accidental, usually as just a, like, it would be a natural above the note, I think, in most notation. But then if you wanted to do like a trill between a B and a D, because it's not a second above, you're usually going to notate that, I don't know how to describe it. Like if you have a half note, it'll be a half note and another half note with a tremolo, like a 3-line. Yeah, it's not great, but no.
Oh shoot.
It's three diagonal lines attached to each note.
Oh yeah. I was very
It would be
close.
like that.
I was very close.
So this is basically a trill between the two notes. But if you take away the things here, this is also a way to notate just 16th notes back and forth, or 8th notes. But again, we like these. These are good. These, first of all, make it seem a lot less intimidating when we look at a page because it's not just a bunch of black notes everywhere, and we're like, oh no, this is terrifying. It also looks like a face, and we like that.
Yes.
String players are simple creatures. Give us a face in our music, and we will laugh at it, and we will have whimsy. Okay.
Is there a preference or possibility difference between like if you're already on a certain finger, so if you're on the index finger, is that usually
Yes.
on or
Trills are good unless it is going from 3 to 4.
Okay.
So you'll always want to go trill from first finger up to second finger or second finger up to third. On cello, you can sometimes get away with going up to fourth finger, but the rule of thumb is second finger is going to be string player's strongest fingers, and then 3, and then 1, and pinky is by far the weakest. Bass might be different, just a second. But at least on upper string So if you're doing a lot of like runs or doing trills with the pinky, it's going to just naturally be a lot weaker and a lot slower. Or something.
If you are deciding to write in fingerings for your players, like printed in your music for bass, do not do trills 2 and 4. If you try and move like just these 2 fingers up and down at a rapid speed, feels kind of awkward, doesn't it? These 2. Don't make your players do that.
Yeah, it's because the muscles are connected.
When in doubt, you can just move your fingers.
Yeah.
Just remember that the thumb doesn't matter on a string player and everything, and just like do that.
Well, for upper strings.
We're going over the basics today. If you're adding in the thumb, oh dear God, your players are going to dislike you greatly. Anyway, but just like be like, oh, is this gonna work? This kind of stretch, and then like, oh, it's not going to. If when in doubt, just go with the easy option, and your players will thank you. Yeah, and then make sure that on trills that it's not just a really short trill thing going on, because a lot of times you'll either write in, is it a mordant? Yeah, like something else. Trills are mainly going to be like in cadences for long runs. And then tremolo. Do you guys know what a tremolo is? Yeah. Tremolos a lot of the time are going. Also, they're going to be longer note values a lot of the time, and they'll have space either before or after. Tremolos are always going to get string players into the upper half of the bow. So you're going to want to do an up bow after that. That lingo does make sense to everybody, right? Yeah. So when you're writing, you'll want to do an up bow after a tremolo. So that's cool.
And because of that, you are do pizzicato immediately after.
Yes. If tremolo into pizzicato is, I don't think I've ever seen it in an actual piece, but please don't do it. Because it sounds cool. Like I'll be the first to admit, like that kind of thing, it's so cool. However, it is physically impossible. Unless you do left-hand pits, but we'll get there. Okay. Colegno. This is a great thing. What?
Colegno.
It doesn't matter.
Sorry.
I'm a white boy from the country, Shannon. I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Okay, so I'm self-conscious anyway. So this thing, this is when we take the bow, turn it upside down, and hit the stick on the string. Do you guys know the plans by Holst?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the beginning of Maurice is this. Yeah, that's good. It sounds really cool. Again, you're going to want space before and after so that players can flip their bow upside down. But yeah, it's easy to do, but it is hard to make it project really well. So don't make it like fortissimo colegno because that's not gonna work. And yeah, okay.
Ooh, I have a question about colegno.
Okay.
So hypothetically, if someone were to write colegno parts for an orchestra, do the players overall would they be concerned about like damaging their bow? So like should you write colegno for orchestra or just should you like avoid it?
Don't use it very much.
Yeah.
Because there are players that will be like, I don't want to damage my bow.
Right.
Yeah, especially because the part of the instrument that you have to do the technique on is the same spot that you're going to be playing on normally. So the player will be getting rosin all into their bow, which they also will not like.
Right.
So use it sparingly. But
what if the composer hypothetically supplied the performance with like chopsticks?
with chopsticks? Okay. Okay.
For example, like.
Hold on.
Are you
I have
writing
chopsticks.
too?
What?
Whole piece too?
Well, no, but there are chopsticks. And
Can you
Oh
try it?
God.
See what it- Do you want me to keep them in here or get them out?
If you want those chopsticks, I had
it's not.
Do you test this on your view?
Yeah.
It's not.
It actually does. A genius, truly. Well, these are mine now. I know what I'm doing after this. Okay. Yeah, if you supply your instrumentalists with chopsticks,
Yeah.
they will want to play the piece. It's the sillier stuff you add in, the more string players are going to be like, yes. So, like, string players are goofy little goobers. We like our silliness. Speaking of silliness, that also works really cool. As an ed major, I have a soft spot for student pieces. The other thing about student pieces that's really good is because they're meant to teach beginner string players certain techniques, they can also be good to teach either a conductor about string techniques, or in you guys' case, composers. So, my favorite piece of music I've written is Rosin Eating Zombies from Outer Space by Richard Meyer. Ash was already 11.
It's great.
Yeah, no, this is great because it has Colenio in it, glissandos in it. We love glissandos. Do you guys know Psycho? It has. If you play on the other side of the bridge, you get that sound. It has that in it. It has tremolo in it, and it also has screams. So it has the silly factor. Hopefully the audio works, but we're gonna listen to this. This should have a score with it too.
It does.
Oh, God.
Unless you have peak string playing.
When you have a breath mark in the string part, does that just mean like separation between those
Yes.
notes? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times it'll also mean a bow lift. So doing a down bow and then lifting the bow, setting it back at the front. What?
It's right there, the bridge.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yep.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of times it'll be a breath mark. So if you have a rest, usually you're not going to need one because string players should naturally just breathe during a rest. But if you have a mark like this where you don't have rest, like it has here the breath marks, probably because this is a piece for 7th and 8th graders. But here, like you want it to be a whole space in between, so that's when you're usually used. That makes sense? Cool. All right. No. Wait, forget that. Oh.
Click this.
What is that? All right, there we go. All right, left-hand pits versus regular pits. So we're gonna go over regular pits first. We all love regular pits. It's just plucking the string. Be careful not to make the rhythms too fast. It takes more effort to pizzicato than to bow. Our fingers can only move so fast, and they do get tired as well. The other thing with regular pits is it's really hard to go from arco to pits and then back to arco over and over again. Because again, everything takes time on string instruments. And especially moving your arm from wherever, however, takes time. So a way to get around that is left-hand pits. If, for instance, you're playing a note, you can put down a lower finger and then with a higher finger, try that. As you can hear, very big sound difference. Left-hand pits is also extremely hard to do because you're having to keep one finger down, keep the intonation there, and then also pluck. And then usually if you're doing left-hand pits, you're also doing something with the bow at that same time. So left-hand pits is something you can use like if it's necessary to have a pizzicato in that exact spot, but usually you're going to want to stay away from it.
For bass players, you can only do left-hand pits on open strings. So don't notate a note that you need to close fingers on.
You can. Just
well,
It doesn't sound good.
doesn't
Yeah.
sound good, and it's way too much effort.
And very
Your
nervous.
players are gonna hate you if you notate left-hand picks with a closed note.
Especially because, like the same thing with trills and everything. The pinky is the weakest finger, but pinky is the finger that you have to do left-hand bits on. So it's just naturally going to be a lot weaker. In Ravel's orchestration of pictures at an exhibition,
The first violin
yeah, the first violins had some good left-hand bits.
is a little bit further ahead.
Do you know where?
Okay, so hits arco at that tempo. This is left-hand pits, otherwise the string players will die. But that's if I can meet a string player that can do that normal pits and make it sound good, that's like they're crazy.
What I would do.
They're not real. So left-hand pits should only be used at like those kind of spots where, like, I guess Ravel decided that pizzicato, that single note there, is super important. If you have such visions for your piece, use left-hand pits, but please not very much.
There's an entire left-hand pick section with bow and like a couple seconds.
Yeah, let me find that.
It's coming right up. Like right after this. It's
Oh,
after
okay.
3 pieces.
Yeah, so something like this even that has arco and then pits, and something like that. Another reason to use left-hand pits, so that you're not throwing your bow.
I have a problem. So right hand pizzicato is harder. Like it's easier to bow and then pits than to pits and bow, in my opinion.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's all I have to say.
The other thing that I've seen is if you do like an up bow right after frog, then you can do a really quick right hand pits. But if you're doing a down bow, don't put a pits after. If you're doing an up bow and it's like way farther out, like if you have a big down bow and a really tiny up bow, the string player is either going to have to like do a big crescendo on that up bow to be able to get back to the pizzicato, or they're just going to have to throw their bow and hope for the best.
Well, also, if you have like a regular pit section and you have it going into it, don't worry if it's too quick going into the regular pit section for an orchestra piece, because usually they'll just split top and bottom for who's going to finish the last one and who's going to start the pits.
Yeah.
Sorry to get so specific on all the bass stuff, but this is really important for you guys to know. Bigger instrument, everything takes longer. Takes longer to speak, takes longer to move. Completely disregard what Shannon just said when writing for bass. Give us at least like a quarter rest. We cannot switch immediately.
No, I'm just saying it's easy to switch
I
from.
know,
Yeah.
I know, but due to the physicality and just the more intense engagement of our instrument, you can't switch.
Yeah. Alright. Everyone good on pizzicato? Cool. Alright. Harmonics. We love harmonics here. So there's two kinds of harmonics. There's natural harmonics and artificial harmonics. Do any of you guys know the difference? String players don't say.
Natural harmonics are without pressings, artificial pressings.
Yeah. So there's a funny thing that you can do on string instruments that like different divisions of the string. Instead of fully putting your finger down, you can get a harmonic. So if you go halfway up an open string, new instrument, I don't know what it is. Halfway up the string, exactly, you can get, without putting the finger down, a harmonic like that. There's also a few like down here. So, their natural harmonics are really easy to play, but they're only on very specific spots on the string. But yeah, those ring really good. Artificial harmonics is when you can put down your first finger and then put down your fourth finger as a harmonic. So, like with open strings, we have this harmonic, but if I want to that kind of thing. And then you can do harmonics on any note you want. The interval that the harmonic is going to be 2 octaves above the note that you're fingering. Yeah, that makes sense? Yeah, those harmonics are going to be interesting because you don't want to put a bunch of them all in a row because we have to move our entire hand and shift for every single one of those. Because we don't have the choice between what fingers to use, so it'll just be first finger is moving around and fourth finger for every single harmonic.
Sorry. Are any of you brass players? You are? What instrument do you play? Saxophone. Oh, never mind. I don't know anything about it. But if anyone's more familiar with brass than they are strings, the harmonic series is very similar to the partial series, where your first change is like you have your bass note, and then you have the octave, then fifth, then octave, then fifth, octave, as it goes on. And the same thing applies for the tendencies, like our seventh is going to be extremely flat.
Yeah. So, yeah, think of harmonics as similar to the harmonic series, but not quite, because there's a lot of harmonics that happen lower on the string than that halfway point. But yeah, a really good example for artificial harmonics is the Tchaikovsky violin concerto. There's an entire spot in there that is the entire main theme in artificial harmonics. I don't think it's on here. Yeah. So if you guys have time, it's like 15 minutes through the first movement or something like that. But yeah. They sound really cool. Just don't do too terribly many of them, and it's also going to be really hard to get them all in tune. The other thing to do a lot of times is when you're notating harmonics. You guys know how to notate harmonics so that they're easy for string players to read? Okay. Just making sure. Cool.
Can you do, at least in natural harmonics, can you do as like a double stop like you can with a guitar, or just like
Yes.
one?
It's like the chord I played earlier. You're gonna stack those harmonics.
Yeah. Usually, if you're going to do double stops with harmonics, keep it to specifically a fifth, so that you can just put your finger down on 2 strings at once and get a harmonic on both of them.
Fourth for bass.
Fourth for bass. Runs. We love it when a bunch of string players have just a bunch of notes in a row. It sounds super cool. However, you want to make sure that make sure your players know if it's important or if it's not important, because a lot of the time, string players are not going to be able to play every single note in a super fast rhythm. So usually you're going to want to keep runs to a scale or an arpeggio. If you have just a bunch of random notes, I can guarantee you the string player is never going to get it. You can have it slurred, you can have it separate. They're going to be very different colors. If you have all the notes in a run slurred, it's very much going to keep that direction. If you have it all separated, usually it's going to crescendo as it's going, as the string player gets more and more excited about what they're doing. And it's just going to naturally get more grr as it goes. But it just really depends on what you're going for. But usually runs are going to be really good when they're slurred, unless you want that super intense sound. And then a lot of times they will have string crossings or shifts.
If you're writing a run that's like a scale, but it goes up and down.
Yeah.
Is it helpful to think about fingering?
Yes, thinking about fingerings is a really big thing. And knowing if you want it all in one string, or if you're okay with it moving around to different strings. Because if you have Like that's all C scale, but like when I jumped down from the C down to the G, it was still on the same string. If it was like if I'm going to different strings, that gets really complicated really fast. So a lot of the time you'll either want to keep it on one string, so probably within a fourth, probably. But if you do like bigger jumps, a lot of the time you'll want to do the same interval. So like if you're going up the C scale, go down a minor sixth, go up again, down a minor seventh, something like that. That makes sense? Yeah. And the like intervals and everything are a lot less important if you don't care about the actual notes and just care about, oh, I want to do run. Like it sounds kind of okay, but you want to make sure that the player knows which one of those you want.
You're talking about describing whether or not it was important to keep all of the notes or just the general direction, flavor. How do we notate that, or what do you mean that is important?
You can either just, a lot of the time dynamics will show it. Like if you have a piano or a pianissimo run, and it also has to do with what other parts are there. Because if you write a bunch of stuff going on, like even if you as a composer think it's super important for all those notes to be there, if it's pianissimo and there's a bunch of other stuff that's more important happening, I guarantee you it'll sound the exact same if the player just doesn't care about what notes they're hitting. But if it's super exposed and if it's like anything with mezzo forte, then you want to make sure that it's playable for all the notes.
I would say with that, you can tell if it's for effect most of the time if it's a slur leading to a quarter note that's like got an accent on it or something.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, context matters.
You can also put it in your program notes, or just tell your players.
Yeah.
Or write it in the actual piece, like a little text, like, this is more for effect. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, like the big thing is like context, and then just if you're in a rehearsal and the player isn't doing it like what you want them to do, just be like, hey, this isn't as important. You don't need to worry about all the notes here, or just be like, oh, this part's really exposed. Like make sure that like the notes are sounding. But yeah. Any questions about runs? All right, bowings. The biggest thing that I can say about bowings is usually your players are going to want to do them themselves. And a lot of the time, if you're not actively a string player, your player is also going to know better about what bowings are going to work better than you will. But there are a few specific things where if you want a specific sound, notate. Like usually you'll want to make sure that every measure will usually start on a down bow, because the frog is a lot heavier, so it's going to be a lot stronger, and it'll naturally decrescendo. But if you want a scooping sound or a crescendo on that, then you'll have an up bow. If you have a pickup note, I can guarantee you every single string player on the face of the planet, if they see a pickup note, they're going to do it up bow. So if you want it to be down bow for some reason, you have to notate it. But yeah, because down bows, natural weighted bow, a bow for crescendos. But yeah, like less is more. You only want to put in bowings if you have a very specific idea of what you want. Let me see. Okay, that's another thing. Another thing for like when you want to put in bowings is if you have like a bunch of chords or something. Chords are going to be on a down bow because you want that that like stronger sound. If you have even like just notes that are repeated over and over, it's going to be really powerful. But if you want more of like a dancey thing, I've had it in pieces, which is a very different color to a down bow. Does that make sense of things? But like notate as much as you feel like is important. But if a string player does come in and be like, these bowings that we wrote in, these aren't like how it would be best to play it, probably listen to them because they know what they're talking about. But just like knowing to stand your ground, all that. And then time signatures with bowings. If you're in 2 or 4 or something like that, because there's two ways that the bow can go. It's going to line up the down bows better. If you're in 3/4 or like any kind of compound time that you're going to end up with staggered bowings, you're going to start the next measure up bow if you just have quarter notes in 3/4 time. That can be good if you want it. If you don't want it, you can do things such as hooking the bow or slurs. What feels that over there? Okay, hook bows and slurs. Do you guys know the difference between those? Okay, so hooked bows, both of these things are when you repeat the bow across multiple notes. Slurs are all together, put together as one note. Hooked bows is you just start the bow and then stop it and then do it again in the same direction. So hooked bows like help with bowings, but still allow the notes to be separate. So if you have, like, it's especially useful in waltzes or something. If you have like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but you want both measures to start down bow, you can notate it. And it sounds more or less the same, but gives you more of that like desired bowing. But then it's also good because if you want some of that space in a note, you can hook the bowings together so that you can have it kind of flow into itself without just, which sounds more roughy. But then there's also kind of the middle between them is it's portato, right? Is that how you pronounce it? Mm-hmm. If you still stop the bow, but kind of just let it like there's separation in between the notes, but it's subtle.
The bow keeps moving, it's just a release of the weight, so it backs off.
Yeah. So think it works as a hook if you don't stop the bow, but it's not a super even thing. Because if it was fully connected, it would be a slur. So slurs would be so one bow, multiple notes. Pay attention to how many string crossings or shifts are in a slur. Shifts during slurs are naturally going to have a slide to them usually. That was terrible. Like usually with string players, it takes time to shift. They can't just teleport up there. If you have a shift in the middle of the slur, it's going to have a little bit of that scoop unless the string player is just locked in. With like changing strings, you're gonna like have a bunch of tone differences. Like the strings are sounding different, but if you're going, the bowing sounds connected, but tone-wise, they're completely different. Yeah, and then glissandos and slurs, you want to make sure those are right in there as well. One more thing about slurs, it's really easy, and especially with like slurs and ties, so just connecting those in general, it's really easy to be like, I want all this to sound the same. So I'm gonna have everything slurred, everything tied. I've seen up to something like 40 measures of whole notes all tied together. We cannot do that. It is physically impossible for us. I don't think it's in here, but you can either tell if you're in a section in a symphony or something, the players can change their bows at different times. If it's in chamber stuff, you want to avoid having too many slurs in a row or too many ties in a row, just because at some point, if the player really wants to do that, they gotta move their bow so slowly that it just starts. We can do it. It doesn't sound good. But like a MIDI playback is never going to tell you that. Oscar, you had.
I was just based about the thing with the different tone on different strings.
Mm-hmm.
Could you do that on like the same note on different strings on like the other bass? Because I'm not as familiar with those.
So like bass, like open D, it's gonna resonate.
So if you have like the A string towards everything else is going to be the biggest difference. But like tuning as well, jeez. But like it's not the biggest difference in the world, but you can tell the difference. Or like if you're doing so not even open notes, but you can still definitely hear the difference, right? Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of notation questions. So
Yeah.
how do you, is this something that you would notate? How would you notate both or would you?
It'd be like just down, like the downward.
Oh, you just do it twice.
Or you do a slur and then you put 2 dots underneath both ends of the slur.
Yeah.
So it's like a staccato mixed in with it. That's how you get the break.
And then for portato or something, you'll do tenuto markings.
Yeah.
Under a slur. Wait, do you have more?
Well, if you did want to do something on the symphony, sometimes you do like staggered bone.
Yeah.
There's like a long full Is that also something that gets notated, or is it just they note?
Sometimes. Usually you'll keep it up to the performers. The way that you can put in staggered bowings is you'll put it in parentheses. And if you put a bowing in parentheses, it'll be around that marking that they'll change bowings, but it will be staggered. But like if you have like 4 measures of whole note and it lands on a down bow, but you're like, oh, it should be up bow at the end. Like just on measure 3, you'll put in parentheses and up bow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Just a note, for cello and bass, our bows are shorter in relation to our instrument than it is for violin and viola. And we cannot fit as many notes under a bow as a violin or viola can.
Can I see your bass bow? So viola bow next to a bass bow. The bass is much bigger than a viola, obviously, but the viola bow is significantly longer. So cello bow is about in the middle. Violin bow is usually the same length, maybe a little bit longer. But the bigger the instrument, the shorter the bow. So like viola bow next to cello bow. The difference is there. So that's something else to keep in mind. The other thing is usually dynamics will also change how much bow a player is using. So if something's piano, you can get away with using like longer bows because it'll be moving slower. If it's louder, if you do fortissimo and like a super long tie, it'll be staggered bows like every half measure. Anyway, any questions on bowings? Cool.
These are supposed to be practice.
These are bad examples.
Yeah, somebody let me borrow them.
What are they supposed to be?
They're supposed to, okay, so the first one, they're bad examples of like bowing, if you were giving it to a strings player and how they would do it. So the first one is usually when you have a dotted 8th with the 16 following it, it's usually a hooked rhythm because it's uneven, so you're going to use more bow on the first one than the second one. So if you do it hooked, you can use like 3/4 of your bow on the first one and then 1/4 of the bow on the second one, and you don't get a weird like accent on the second one or like a airy sound trying to get it back. Do you want to show it?
Yeah. So like if it was all separate.
But do you see how far he works himself up in the bow?
Yeah. So if then I was to change it, so I'll do the 16th still separate. But I'll do the rest of it. Very different. And the second way is going to be a lot easier.
And then the second one is if you were to sit and count out your bowings, if you were to start the first note and the first measure there on a down bow, your second measure would start with an up bow, which wouldn't be strong to start a triplet figure on. But this can be fixed by putting in a hooked bowing or breaking up your slur.
Yeah.
Or putting in a slur.
even just like adding in a slur like on the first two notes here, because slurs can also be good for like emphasizing something. So nothing.
But if you just start those triplets with up,
Yeah. I can't even do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's bowing crash course, but I feel like a lot of higher level string players, especially that I talk to, the right hand is a lot more trouble than the left hand. So making sure that right hand stuff is a lot easier will, first of all, help each individual part, but also help everyone fit together more. Because if bowings are all over the place, first of all, it'll sound bad, but it also looks sloppy. Like if you, I can't think of a good example, but if you guys are at like classical music performance and all of those are going different ways, it just doesn't, it doesn't look great. Whereas if they're all going the same way at all at the same time, it'll look super uniform and it immediately just makes your brain go, oh, you guys know what they're doing. So yeah. Fingerings. For the most part, this is another thing of let the musician come up with their own fingerings. But like a lot of the time, for some of these techniques we've already talked about, like you need to know a little bit about the fingerings to know how it would happen on the instrument to make it easier on the performer. So like being familiar with the open strings on all the instruments and everything in first position, either 3 or 4 notes. The 4th note in first position is going to be the next highest open string on the other instruments. Bass is weird. But yeah, fingerings do not need to be written into the part unless you want a certain fingering for a specific sound. So if you're, so sol strings, which is where you're just playing on one string, sliding into a note, that's another thing. Playing a note as an open string, you just put a little 0 over it instead of 1, 2, 3, or 4, and that's an open string. Or using harmonics. If you're, do you guys know how to notate fingerings for harmonic? Okay, so if you have a harmonic, let's say for a violin, if we have a G, we'll notate it like this. So 4 and a 0. And that'll tell us the difference between playing it as a G and same note, very different timbres.
Which one was the difference, and how would you notate the difference?
This is harmonic. If you didn't have the 4, if I saw this on a piece of music and it didn't have the 4-0 over it, I would assume it would be. But with that, I know it's a. Yeah. Yeah. So then shifts versus string crossings. When we're talking about slurs, talked about how each string has a different sound to it. So you wanna use that to your advantage. If you want the different notes to have different sounds, by all means, use the different sounds of the strings to your advantage. If you have a big run going up, the brighter strings on the top will help it have more direction towards the top of the run. However, if I'm wanting to play something super dark, I'm not going to want to go up to, hold on. I can go as high as I want to go. So we have string players pick the path of least resistance. So string crossings are a little annoying because we have to move our entire hand up and down. So if we can do it all on one string, that's pretty cool. And violinists will usually tend to avoid the E string because the E string is so much brighter than literally everything around. We lost our violinist because she left. However, if you think this is a big string, a violin E string is, if you hear an open E in an orchestra, it sounds slightly disgusting. So that's something to keep in mind a little bit for like higher register stuff for violin. But sol strings is really cool. If you put like sol G, for instance, that'll mean all on the G string. Yeah, it'll create that sound with the tone. It depends usually, like on the context for if you need to notate it or not. Usually, I found instrumentalists will not just assume to all play it soul strings, especially if you don't, especially like lower level players. But like, I would just to be safe, just notate it if you want it as a soul string. But it'll usually, unless you have a marking to make sure that it's known that it's soul, like put a bracket before or like on top of or underneath the notes that you want to be sold that string, either solid or dotted. Where'd my train of thought go? Usually at the end of a phrase, the string player will just be like, oh yeah, don't need to do this anymore unless you notate it otherwise. And a common way of notating it is by putting in a Roman numeral. So a 1 Roman numeral will be the highest string, 4 will be the lowest. So you can just put in, instead of sol C for a viola, just Roman numeral 4 over the thing, and then we'll play everything on C string. Yeah, and then a few other good examples, that's a word. Other good examples, Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto. The first violins start the first movement as sol G, and it makes it sound a lot more muted instead of the thrilling that it kind of can be in that key.
Say like I was writing 8 measures and the first 4 I wanted it on a soul string. How would I tell perform to stop?
I would put a bracket. Okay. Yeah. So kind of like the same as like if you have the 8-8 to like change the octave, I've noted it like that.
At a certain point, cellists and basses can play notes using their thumb. If you want to indicate that a note should be played using the thumb, just like put a plus sign above it. But don't go any lower than the first harmonic with thumb.
The plus is interesting though because plus is also the notation for left-hand pizzicato.
So that's, yeah, I typically, if I'm notating anything, I would do a circle with a plus through it, or a circle with a thing, like a line.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so another good soul string example is pictured at an exhibition again, the Samuel and Goldberg. Yeah, I don't want to play it. Oh, there's a video.
Yeah, I put it in.
Thank you, Shannon.
That's not really.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Ashley.
So you can hear the slides in there too, because you have to shift all over the place on soul strings. But it all has that nice gritty sound to it that it wouldn't get on other This is also how cool strings can sound if they're all in perfect unison. So it's like you're getting that same timbre quality, but sacrificing like cleanness of shifts a little bit because there's a lot more shifts, so more sliding kind of things, especially in an orchestra setting. And also, like just being real string player intonation on soul strings is going to be a lot worse. So you're going to have intonation issues with your players if you use that. And then like common positions and everything, like whether you're doing soul strings or on all of them. First position is the main one. Third position, where you put your first finger on where the third finger would go on first position. Does that make sense? Yeah. Third position, that's the other main one that people will use. Yeah, and then shifts will be, if you want to notate a shift, put in the fingering, but then you put a dash before it. So like -3 would be like, oh, I'm going from this 3 to that 3.
Well, those positions are very helpful for cellos and chin fiddles. They're not as helpful for double bass use sometimes a different system, which revolves around the harmonics.
Yeah, bases are weird. Anyway.
Let's try right fingerings for us.
Don't write fingerings for us. Unless you are a bassist and you're phenomenal, don't.
Okay. It is a thing though that usually positions can also be notated with Roman numerals. So you want to just pick one of the two that if you're using Roman numerals, pick either strings or positions and use that for the entire piece. Don't go back and forth. Anyway. Any questions on that? Cool. Key signatures. Key signatures don't seem like they would matter, but they do a lot more than you think. A general rule of thumb is because, like, for brass instruments or wind instruments, because you'll play in flats a lot of the time because especially on brass instruments, you press the keys down and the note goes down. On string instruments, you put a finger down and the note goes up in pitch. So usually string players are going to be more comfortable playing in sharps than they are in flats. The main keys that string players love seeing are like C, G, D, and A major because they have sharps and they don't have too many accidentals in them. Their relative minors are also good. One of the big things about these, and also the big thing about these keys is they resonate the best with open strings. So if you're playing in D major, you have, as the other open strings on viola at least, you have the 4, the 5, and the 7 as open strings. So just in general, if you write for D major, a viola is going to have a really easy time resonating because all the strings resonate. Whereas if you write something in F is going to be a lot more muted. Like that as opposed to. Can you guys hear how much differently it resonates, the F versus the G? So F will usually, string players will usually tend to throw F a little bit flat and everything. But it can still be a really good key. You just want to know what key is going to affect the instrument based on resonance. But also, if you add more than 4 or 5 sharps or flats to a key signature, the string player is going to blow up, and they will not be happy. But you basically just want to know how the string instrument is going to resonate in that given key, and decide if that's important to you, and if it is important to you, what key works best, based on how muted or open sounds can be. You have something?
Yeah, so obviously you have certain keys and they're relative minors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there other modes or scales that you guys are really comfortable with? So for example, if I just asked you to play a G major one, you could do that without me, right? But then if I threw an octatonic at you, you'd probably freak out a little bit, maybe?
Probably.
Okay. So are there certain ones you guys are oh yeah, that's fine.
It depends. Usually, string player warm-ups are usually just major, the main kinds of minor, and then arpeggios of them. Those are the things that we practice the most. As soon as you get into octatonic skills, whole tone, it depends. Pentatonic is usually easy, but a lot of those kind of scales, string players are going to panic because that is not what we warm up with usually.
In context of the orchestra, do you know are the keys still usually sharp for the wind members as well? I know that's kind of
Do you mean for transposing?
What?
Do you mean for transposing?
For the score itself, if a conductor, the full score.
There's different kinds of scores. There's C scores that have everything in concert pitch, but then there's other scores that have everything in position.
So would it probably would transpose to a magnitude?
It depends. It all depends on the piece, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, let's if you are writing a piece that's in B for string players, it's going to be in E major for clarinetists. And they're probably not going to like that very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so keys are always just an interesting thing because string instruments and wind players don't overlap in very much. And different keys, because like B flat for wind players, they love that. F for wind players, a lot of times they like that as well. But, and it, like that works for strings, but strings will prefer something like D major. But if you tell your wind players, oh, we're gonna play everything in concert D, they might not like you very much. So it's finding that balance and finding what parts are important for the given piece. Does that make sense? Okay. I feel like out of everything so far, like key signatures are the thing that matter the least. It's just like it's a very subtle thing, but it exists. Okay. Okay. So as a med major, I have to plug the student composers. These guys are great. If you can ever get a chance to look at student pieces, you will learn more from these than you can from like anything else. So I'll be honest, I don't know who Chris Pilsner is, but Ashley really likes him apparently. But like all of these guys, especially like Soon-Hee Newell, writes really cool pieces as well that use a lot of like advanced techniques that you guys can look at. But like all of these pieces up here are like, they can still teach a student something, but they don't skimp out on like how technical they get, if that makes sense. Words aren't working anymore. But like if you're thinking, oh, I, a composer, want to know like how shifting can affect an instrument, you can go to something like Richard Meyer's Night Shift. It's a really easy piece that teaches kids shifting, but also like just straight up just shows you how those fingerings work, what kind of parts you would shift in and everything, and it's really good. Yeah. Like I feel like I'm a little biased towards student composers, but like I know when I've written things in the past, I've learned more from this than looking at a full like Mahler score or something. But these use the same techniques as a Mahler score. It's just a lot more digestible, and it's only in strings as well. And like some of these people will also write full symphony pieces, but I think just looking at a super simple string score and then adding it into everything you know about wind playing is going to be so much better. Any questions on this? And if you guys don't remember these names in about 5 minutes, which I know I wouldn't, the slides should be sent to Andrew.
Yeah, I love the slides up, and I can also like turn that into a list.
But I think, yeah, I think that's everything that I have here. Does anyone have literally any questions about anything? It could be something we went over here. It could be like any other questions you have about strings.
So how do you guys feel about like other specific rhythms or strings that like do or don't work, or certain meters that like create some sort of havoc? So like our triplets are a pain in the ass and like a simple meter or something.
Yeah, triplets aren't crazy. I think usually it gets a little interesting when you have like odd numbers of notes in a measure, and then you have to figure out if slurs are happening or if the bow is just going to be backwards for the next measure. And like a big thing, the big thing with rhythms as well is figuring out how they overlap with the other parts so that they can all stay together. But I think rhythms are mostly a thing with bowings and how that all works. Unless, Oscar, I'm gonna pick on you real quick just because there's a very specific rhythm in the piece we're playing tomorrow that is really funny to me. Like if you write a bunch of like 30-second notes and then a triplet in the middle of it and everything, and there's no way to know any of that. There's also like no goings written in, but it's like da 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 da. Like it honestly might help because it also it's really scary looking at a huge line like that. Even though when I was reading that, it's like it's not that hard, right? But all of it is just put together as one long stem for the entire measure.
So maybe like would like beam breaks help?
Yeah, that would help a lot. There's like that's a way, like even just notation can completely change the way that we look at bones and rhythms and everything. I can't speak for wind players. I don't know if it's the same for wind players or not, but at least for string, because we have so many things that we have to keep track of, otherwise our entire sound falls apart. It's really good to make the notation as easy and legible as possible. Otherwise, the string player will blow up. I feel like I'm talking about a string player at this point, like it's like a nature documentary. Like in the wild, the string player will hate you. Like, yeah, that makes sense, Andrew.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Anything you guys want demonstrated on any instruments either? All right. Cool. If you guys have any questions in the future,